Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Oh, thank you. Today,
Lovely morning.
today's Mishnah has been sponsored. Today's Mishnah has been sponsored by, in memory of Sophie Razamovsky, Shifra Bas Schweiger by her nephew Barry Steinberg, and Shomer Shavan Aliyah.
Amen.
All right, we are learning Mishna Nazir, Perek Gimel, Chapter 3, Mishnah Mishnah 5. Okay, now, it's going to be a little bit of a complicated Mishnah, and actually something that we're going to learn later is very relevant to this Mishnah. And the Mishnah reads as follows: Mishna Nazir, somebody who declared himself a Nazir, and guess where he is? He's in a cemetery.
Three.
That's the case. Now we know that a Nazir is not allowed to make himself tamei through a dead body. So this person is in the Beis HaKvaris, and he accepts him, and he makes himself a Nazir. That's when he declares himself a Nazir. That's what he did. So afilu hayasham shleishim yayim, even if he spent 30 days there, and actually those 30 days that if this person were to spend 30 days in the Beis HaKvaris, right? Would he be able to drink wine? No. He made himself a Nazir. Were he able to cut his hair? No, he made himself a Nazir. But at the end of the day, he's tamei. He made himself impure. So the Mishnah says, and actually just to add one more aspect to that, if somebody were to tell him, you got to get out of here, 2 witnesses warned him, and he didn't get out,
He's in trouble.
he gets malchus, he gets lashes. But at the end, so it's a very odd situation. He is a Nazir, but he's in a state of impurity, and that's how he made himself a Nazir. Says the Mishnah, "Ein oilin loy min haminyan." These 30 days, or whatever days that he observed Naziris, don't count towards his vow of Naziris, right? He made a Naziris, let's say, for 30 days. You know, any of these days aren't going to count towards his Naziris. Now, the Einamevi carbon tuma. Now, if let's say this same person, he's still tamei because he was in the cemetery, and then he went over and he touched a corpse. Now, here's a very important idea. Here's a very important halacha, which I clearly forgot. It's a Mishnah later. And that's like this. We know we always say that if the Nazir becomes tamei through the impurity of a dead body, what happens? Got to start all over again, and he's got to bring a set of karbonis because he's tamei. That does not apply to every situation of tuma from a dead body. We're going to see a Mishnah later. It's going to be a while till we get there. Perek Zayin, chapter 7, that there are going to be types of tuma that a Nazir may not become tamei from them because he's a Nazir, but some of them are going to cause him to forfeit the Naziris that he did, and some of them aren't. That's the halacha. Being in a cemetery, becoming tamei because you were in a cemetery, or because you, I don't know, touch, whatever it is that makes you tamei in a cemetery, being in the proximity of a grave, right? That is a Nazir is not going to become tamei like that. But if he does, it does not make him forfeit the Naziris that he kept until now. Doesn't make him forfeit it. And if I'm not mistaken, right. Hold on. Just want to make sure about something here. Right. There are these types of tumas like in a cemetery. Once you become tamei, those days that you're tamei won't count. Let's say you kept 15 days, and then you became tamei from going to a cemetery. So the halacha is that the days that you remain tamei don't count towards your naziris, but the days that you kept aren't forfeited either. You don't have to cut your hair. You don't bring a set of karbonis that the Nazir who's tamei brings. So in our case, you've got a person who starts off tamei from a cemetery, and he's still tamei from the cemetery. And then what does he do? He goes and he touches a corpse, which would have been something that would have caused him to have to forfeit whatever the Naziris he would have kept, to cut his hair, and to bring a whole set of karbonis of a Nazir tamei, of an impure Nazir. In this case, where this guy he was never in a state of purity, the halacha is that even if he goes ahead and he touches a corpse now, the Eina Mevi carbon tuma, he will not bring the carbon tuma. Yatsa v'nichnas. Now, let's say this guy, he's doing great. He leaves. He becomes tahar, purifies himself, and he goes back in. He goes back into the cemetery. He's got this thing with cemeteries, okay? And he goes back into the cemetery, all right? In that situation, the days that he observed are going to count towards the number that he needs to fulfill his Nazirus term. Umevi carbon tuma, and if he touches now a corpse, he will have to go through the whole process of a Nazir Tameh. So this guy went to, meaning, so the point here is like this. In this part of the Mishnah, the guy became tar. He was in a state of tahara. Then he went back into the cemetery. Now, let's say he got himself tar, and he kept 10 days of Nazirus, and he went back into the cemetery. Those 10 days that he kept until now are going to count towards his whatever term he took about himself for Nazirus. The days that he's Tameh aren't going to count. Now, this same guy who's Tameh again from the cemetery, but at one point did become tar, right? In the beginning of the Mishnah, he never was tar. He made himself a Nazir in the cemetery. In this case, he left the cemetery, made himself tar, went back into the cemetery. And then he touched the corpse. Now he messed himself up. Now he actually becomes a Nazir Tameh, in the sense that whatever Nazirus he kept, he forfeits. He's got to cut his hair. He's got to bring the sacrifices of a Nazir who became Tameh from a dead body. Because once he came into a state of purity, now, and even if he makes himself Tameh again from the cemetery, but he had a state of purity, now when he goes and he touches the corpse, he's going to forfeit his Nazirus. He's going to have to go through the whole process of a Nazir Tameh. And all of this is derived from a pasuk, from a verse in the when the Torah talks about a Nazir. That at the end of the day, that what happens is that there are certain types of tumah from a dead body that make you tameh, and while you're tameh, those days that you're tameh will not count towards your Nazirus, even though you'll be keeping Nazirus. You're not going to cut your hair, you're not going to drink wine, but those tumahs are not going to cause you to forfeit the Nazirus you kept. You don't have to cut your hair and bring the karbanos of a Nazir tameh. If a person, once a person was a Nazir tar, at some point he was a Nazir that was tar. He was at one point a Nazir that was observing and his days were counting towards his Nazirus. Even if then he makes himself impure from a cemetery, so again that purity is not going to cause him to forfeit his days. But if even after he became tameh from a cemetery, then he touches a corpse, which is something that typically that makes a Nazir have to forfeit his days, even though he's already tameh from the cemetery, but now he touched the corpse, he will forfeit all his days. He has to cut his hair, go through the process of a Nazir tameh with the karbanos, the sacrifice is cutting his hair, and you got to start all over again. All right. Now the Mishnah continues. Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Rabbi Eliezer says, Loi boi bayoim. It can't be on that same day. Shenemar, as it says, V'hayamim harishayim yiplu. The first days shall fall away. Hashiula yamim rishayim. It's got to have first days. Now, what this means is like this. It sounds like from the first half of the Mishnah that our Nazir, right? What did he do? He went to the cemetery, made himself a Nazir in the cemetery. He came out. He made himself tar. And so when he made himself tar, he went ahead and he, hold on a second. Right. He made himself tar. And on that very day that he made himself tar, 1 second here. Right. The beginning of the Mishnah implies that this Nazir who made himself tar, if on the very day that he made himself tar, right, he then went ahead and he touched, and he went ahead and he touched the corpse. That very same day, right? He made himself tahar, which is now how he is starting his Naziris, right? He was in a cemetery when he started his Naziris. Those days don't count towards his Naziris term. So this person now, he goes ahead, he makes himself tahar, and on that same day he makes himself tahar, he touches a corpse.
He doesn't have to go back and just touch them a mess.
Right.
I don't know. Someone dies and
He touched the mess.
All right.
He touched the mess, right? That causes him to forfeit, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to say that even that day that he may have kept, right? That day that you think that day that he kept, let's say he kept, I'm not sure exactly how to calculate this, but he went and he kept that first day. He kept it. But then on that same day that he started keeping it, he went ahead and he touched the corpse. So you today start all over again, right? Because you touched the corpse. Says Rebbe Lezer, nope. Rebbe Lezer says that the halacha is that, according to Rebbe Lezer, he may count this day as his first day of his Naziris term, even though he became tameh from a type of corpse tumah, normally causing the Nazir to forfeit his term. Therefore, the day he completes his purification and continues Naziris counts as the second day of his term. Right. Meaning, what's happening according to Rebbe Lezer is that, and this is really a rule all the time, according to Rebbe Lezer. If you go ahead, you become a Nazir. You're in day one of a Naziris, and you started your Naziris, and it was a Naziris of Tahara, purity. And that day you touch a corpse. Which means now, got to start all over again, right? Says Rebbe Lezer, no. Day one counts. Day one counts. You now have to you got to go through the process of a Nazir Tameh. And then after you purify yourself and you start again, what day are you starting from? Day 2, not day 1. Because according to Belezer, the pasuk reads, as the Mishnah says, "V'hayamim harishayim yiplu," the first days shall fall away. Days means plural. You have to have at least 2 days that are falling away in order to forfeit. That's the Mishnah. That's how he reads the pasuk. In order to say that when you touch something like a corpse, the first days fall away, which means everything you did is forfeited, that's only if you have first days. You have 2 days. But if all you had is 1 day, the 1 day isn't forfeited. Of course, you got to go through the whole process of a Nazir Tameh, but after you got through the whole process, you start again, you're starting from day 2. But it's also pretty clear from the wording of the Mishnah that the first Tana doesn't hold that way. He holds that if you went ahead and you touched the corpse on day 1 is done, it's gone. What does he do with the pasuk? He reads it differently. He reads it differently. The way they explain it here is he reads that the point here is that when you become tameh, you don't just forfeit 1 day, meaning the day you became tameh. A general rule, it's not just you become tameh, you forfeit the entire Naziris. But it's not teaching you that you have to have a minimum of a certain amount of days to forfeit. The point is that when you become tameh, you don't just lose that day you became tameh, you lose all the days. So at the end of the day, what we have here in the Mishnah, although the Mishnah frames it within the same case that we had about this Nazir, he went to the cemetery, he came out, really this argument is a general argument. A Nazir starts his Naziris. Regular Nazir starts his Naziris. It's day 1 of his Naziris. And on day 1 he touches a corpse. Does he lose that day or not? According to the Tanna Kama, he does. According to Rebbe Lezer, he does not. And at the end of the day, the halacha is like Rebbe Lezer, according to the Bartanura. That if it's day 1, you keep day 1, but you have to go through the process, and then when you start again, you're actually starting from day 2. Have a wonderful day.